Alright, part two of me reading to you guys. So we left off at page 5 on the last. Okay. So, the trope 10 minutes. Okay. Later studies have shown that the same applies to humans. By criticizing, we do not make lasting changes and often incur resentment. Hans Selye, I don't know, I'm sorry. Another great psychologist said, as much as we thirst for approval, we dread condiment. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce anything right now. The resentment that criticism engenders can demoralize employees, family members, and friends, and still not correct the situation that has been condemned. I'm sorry. George B. Johnston of Ian okay. Oklahoma is the safety coordinator for an engineering company. One of his responsibilities is to see that employees wear their hard hats whenever they're on the job in the field. He reported that whenever he came across workers who were not wearing their hard hats, he would tell them with a lot of authority of regulation that they must comply. As a result, he would get sullen acceptance, and often after he left, the worker would remove the hats. He decided to try a different approach. The next time he found some of his workers not wearing their hard hats, he asked if the hats were uncomfortable or did not fit properly. Then he reminded the men in a pleasant tone of voice that the hat is designed to protect them from injury, and suggested that it always be worn at the job. The result was increased complaints. What? Compliance. Oh my god. The result was increased compliance with the regulation, with no resentment or emotional upset. You will find examples of futility of criticism bristling on a thousand pages of history. Take for example, the famous quarrel between Theodore Roosevelt and President Taft. A quarrel that split the Republican Party, put Woodrow Wilson in the White House, and wrote bold, luminous lines across the First World War, and altered the flow of history. Let's review the facts quickly. When Theodore Roosevelt stepped out of the White House in 1908, he supported Taft, who was elected president. Then Theodore Roosevelt went off to Africa to shoot lions. When he returned, he exploded. He denounced Taft from his conservatism. I don't know. Tried to secure the nomination for a third term himself. Formed the Bull Moose Party, and all but demolished the GOP. In the election that followed, William Howard Taft and the Republican Party carried only 2 states, Vermont and Utah, the most disastrous defeat the party had ever known. Theodore Roosevelt blamed Taft. But did President Taft blame himself? Of course not. With tears in his eyes, Tarf said, I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have. Who was to blame, Roosevelt or Taft? Frankly, I don't know, and I don't care. The point I'm trying to make is that all of Theodore Roosevelt's criticism did not persuade Taft that he was in the wrong. It merely made Taft strive to justify himself and reinterrogate with with tears in his eye. I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have done. Or take the Teapot Dome oil scandal. It kept the newspaper ringing with indignation in the early 1920s. It rocked the nation. Within memory of living men, nothing like it had ever happened before in America public life. Here are the bare facts of the scandal. Albert B. Fall, Secretary of the Interior of Harding's cabinet, was entrusted with the leasing government oil reserves at Elk Hill and the Teapot Dome. Oil reserves that had been set aside for the future use of the Navy. Did Secretary Fall permit competitive bidding? No, no, sir. He handed the fat, juicy contract outright to his friend Edward L. Donny. And what did Donny do? He gave Secretary Fall what he was pleased to call a loan of $100,000. Then, in high-handed manner, Secretary Fall ordered United States Marines into the district drive-off competitors whose ejected wells were sapping oil out of the Elk Hill reserves. These competitors, driven off their ground at the end of guns, rushed into court and blew the lid off of the Teapot Dome scandal. A stench arose whose vile that made it ruined the Harding administration, nauseated an entire nation, threatened to wreck the Republican Party, and put Albert B. Fall behind prison bars. Fall was commended viciously commended as a few men in the public life have ever been. Did he repent? Never. Years later, Herbert Hoover, intimated in a public speech that President Harding's death had been due to mental anxiety and worry because a friend had betrayed him. When Mrs. Fall heard that, she sprang from her chair, she wept, she shook her fist at fate and screamed, "What, Harding betrayed by Fall? No, my husband never betrayed anyone. This whole house full of gold would not tempt my husband to do wrong. He is the one who has been betrayed and led the slaughter and crucified. There you are, human nature in actions, wrongdoers blaming everyone but themselves. We are like that. So when you and I are tempted to criticize someone tomorrow, let's remember Captain, Two Gun Crowley, and Albert Fall. Let's realize that criticisms are like homing pigeons. They always return home. let's realize that the person we are going to correct and commend will probably justify themselves or herself and commend us in return. Or like the gentle Taft will say, I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have. On the morning of July 5th, and that's 10 minutes, so I'll see you guys tomorrow and continue reading. So I read 3 pages today, so bye-bye.